So, now I am going to jump directly into the details of the integrated plan options A and B, and there are many features associated with it. They are called integrated because they are integrated with Social Security. They are quite complex. The information is in the PEB task force report. However, there are three key aspects which requires further analysis to understand them and to make them very transparent. So, the three things that I want to emphasize: one is that the age factors increase with salary, and I am going to discuss that a little bit later, and that age factors decrease with time, and then the third thing is that it really actually hits middle income employees where most of our faculty are, in terms of that contributions will be the highest as a percentage of both Social Security and UCRP combined, and that also I am going to discuss a little bit later. So, most of my presentations is going to focus on these three complex features. In order to understand them deeper, one must understand this formula which says that the total pension that you get percent replacement is determined by three things. One is your salary, which is actually a simplified version, times the age factor and how many years you have worked for the university. So, suppose you have worked for the university for 40 years. Currently at the age of 60 or later, if you retire, you get an age factor of 2.5. So, if you work for 40 years, you get an age factor of 2.5, you get 100. 2.5 times 40 is 100, which means you can get 100% replacement income after 40 years of service with the university, because the age factor is 2.5. And most of these options are going to ask you to reduce this age factor and therefore reduce the percent pension income. And integrated plans, the formulas are the same, but the complexity happens because this age factor, which currently depends only upon your age and nothing else, in the new plans they will depend upon your salary, and it will also depend upon the time when you retire. So, those are the complications that makes this these formulas much more complex. So, the first feature is that the age factors increase with salary. So, this is for option A and this is for option B. For simplification, I am just going to focus on option B. So, what this says is that if people were to retire in 2010 and if you were 65 or older, then people who are earning 60,000 or less will retire with an age factor of 2.00 instead of 2.50. So, that is a 20% reduction. And people who retire with salaries of 120,000 or more, they will retire with the same factor 2.5. So, there is no benefit cuts for them. And in between 60 and 120, which is double of 60 is 120, the age factor will rapidly rise from 2 to 2.5. It is not a linear curve, slightly complicated, but the main message here is that higher wage employees will receive a higher percent of their income at the retirement than lower wage employees in both options A and options B. And in the current system that we have, this age factor is 2.5 for all employees. The second factor that we discuss is that these age factors actually decrease with time. Now, this is the one that is least understood and is one of the most challenging way. So, what I just showed you earlier was 2010, but in 2020 these curves will look different. So, again if we focus on option B, remember in the last slide I said people who are earning less than 60,000 earn an age factor of 2, but by 2020 these numbers would have shifted. So, by 2020 people who are earning less than 80,000 will also earn age factor of only 2.00. So, in some way you can think of this curve as a roller coaster, and that you will slide down this roller coaster towards the bottom if your salaries do not rise rapidly enough with respect to what is known as Social Security covered compensation. So, this slide says because the Social Security covered compensation will rise at least 35%, and we have data to back up that it will rise at least 35% in the next 10 years, then your pension incomes will slip. So, you may think that right now you have an age factor of 2.25, but 10 years down the road you may have an age factor of 2.00 when you retire from the university. So, this is to repeat the same message. Basically says this blue curve here, which is for 2010, actually shifts to the right as the time moves. So, it shifts from 60 to 80. So, the people who are in this curve actually reduces. So, suppose for example, if your salary is 80,000, right now you have slightly higher than 2.0 age factor, but by 2020 your age factor will be reduced to 2. So, essentially the salaries must rise in commensurately with the social security covered compensation, otherwise your age factors will slip. And the third message I want to give about these options A and B, which are very complicated, is what is the pay in, how much you are going to contribute to the UCRP pension plans. And so what is happening is that these graphs are showing what is your contribution combined to social security, which is 6.2% up to social security wage base, and then an additional contribution to the UCRP. The reason why I am adding both of these is because one of the objectives of these integrated plans is that you get about the same percentage replacement income from both of these sources. Therefore, one would naturally expect that you sort of put in about the same percentage income from both these sources combined. But that is not what happens. If you are earning, so again let me focus on option B. So, up to social security covered compensation, which is about $60,000 or so, you pay 4% into the UCRP, and on top of that social security 6.2%. So, if you add these numbers, you pay about 10.20% in both these sources. But between this number and the SSWB, which is the social security wage base, your contribution rises rapidly. So, it increases from 10% to 12% total between social security covered compensation of 60K and 106K. So, you should think if you have a salary of about $100,000, let us say, then you will be paying about 12% of your salary, 6% roughly in social security and 6% roughly into the UCRP pension plan. But because the high income people do not have to pay into the social security above this, their contribution actually total percent income per percent contribution dies down rapidly. So, in fact, people who are earning more than $200,000 will be putting in less percentage of their salary into these sources combined than people who are earning 60,000 or less. In particular, for most of the faculty, as you will see in the next slide, falls in this middle income employees range. So, we will be hit with the maximum contribution range, most of the UCSC faculty, and the staff, the curve is a little bit to the left. So, they will be paying 10.2%, but some of the higher paid staff will be here. But what I showed with the last one, most of the staff who is here is eventually going to slide down this curve and go into the flat, unless their salary rises 35 to 50% in the next 10 years, I would say a highly unlikely scenario. So, the three things put together, which is the age factors dependence on salary, middle income contribution is peaking, and age factors deteriorating with time, we believe options A and B, both integrated plan options, are very complex, difficult to understand and very costly to implement. Also, they are very rare. If you try to find out are there other institutions where these kind of plans are existent, it is very difficult to identify one. I personally do not know of any. None of the 8 educational institutions or any additional 13 educational institutions that are mentioned in the task force report uses this kind of a plan. CalPERS and CalSTARS, the major ones do not use. I have been told that maybe there is some small segment of CalPERS that uses somewhat similar plan. I have not been able to verify that. In any case, these kind of plans are extremely rare. There is very high uncertainty because you do not know what SSCC will be, you do not know what SSW will be, and they are also inequitable because the benefits are actually non-uniformly cut. Lower wage employees and the middle income faculty will have to pay, will get lower benefits than their counterparts in other disciplines and other campuses which are higher salaries. So, this is the first time in the history of University of California that if you have lower salary, you will also get lower benefits. And now also I discussed progressive deterioration with time. There are certain faculty which believes that they can catch up in terms of that their salaries and their cost of living increases will be fast enough to catch up with this SSCC. But as I said, in the next 10 years, SSCC is going to rise somewhere between 35 to 50%, and we have done a separate analysis which is not included in these slides, that for most of the faculty, including cost of living increase based on the 10 years past data and the merit increase, they will still not be able to catch up with the SSCC. And this is in view, financially, fiscally, university is going through a much harder time period. So I think it's even not possible to assume that university will be able to provide the COLA the way they have provided in the last 10 years. But so there will be progressive deterioration with time, with an overwhelming majority of the faculty as well.